So while Washington haggles, DOGE, the Trump administration's spending watchdog, is rolling out the cuts. The agency now projects $130 billion in savings. Mass layoffs are being planned at the Treasury Department. 7 million 120-year-olds just got marked as deceased in the Social Security records. And they are taking an even closer look at a host of DEI initiatives that are continuing, despite Trump's executive order eliminating them. That includes $1.3 billion in active National Institutes of Health grants that continue funding race-based hiring schemes and anti-racist training. They just can't help themselves. But while we're slashing waste, here's another candidate, the billions that go to NPR and PBS. They're biased, and no one watches Sesame Street anymore. The CEOs of both organizations will face a House DOGE subcommittee hearing this week where lawmakers will press them on spending and accountability. Bill, all of this, and good to see you, my friend.
I see you. Afternoon.
All of this really falls on lawmakers to raise the debt ceiling. And the reporting that is coming out of what's going to happen with the reconciliation in the Senate and the House, and this is the great big beautiful tax cut plan, is that John Thune told Senate Republicans yesterday that he wants to get it done or on the floor of the Senate by April 7th, and that he's going to try and fold the debt limit into reconciliation. And there is some heavy-duty pushback, not just from Senator Rand Paul, but also, say, Senator Ron Johnson and Mike Lee about big old spending cuts. Mike Lee mentioned, he said, spending cuts must total at least $2 trillion to get his support. And that's $500 billion higher than even what was in the House budget reconciliation. And I hope they have a taste for it, because that's where this nation has to go.
My sense is it's going to be a sticky wicket. In addition to these two senators you mentioned, Hawley and Tuberville, Missouri and Alabama, they've got issues with this because of the potential for Medicaid cuts. We'll see whether or not that's in there. Rand Paul says he's not going to vote for anything that raises the debt ceiling. He's just not going to do it. But you could still get this through with all the other Republicans if J.D. Vance has the deciding vote here. One thing I want to make clear, like everybody talks about cutting taxes, this is not a tax cut. This is a continuation of the taxes you pay today. This is retroactive to 2017, the initial Trump tax cuts that were kept in place during the Biden years. No one's getting a cut here unless you cut taxes on tips or you cut taxes on the money you get through Social Security. I think the other thing is that I know when Trump was going for his cabinet, especially on the economic side, he was asking members of his team, can I cut the debt and not force this country into a recession? And he was obsessed with this many, many months before the election even took place. So that was in the back of his mind. Can I right the economic ship without pushing us over the edge? And I think that's where a lot of the way I see it is the way this DOGE conversation comes into everything. I see DOGE as meeting the moment to make government more efficient. You know, I talk about this a lot. You know, the digital age and the space age they're intersecting here. And in the middle, you got AI. And we'll get to robotics later in the hour here. In the middle, you got AI intersecting through all of this. And I was watching Graydon Carter on MSNBC this morning. He's talking about a new book he's got out.
What's wrong with you?
I was caught up in the fascination. He's talking about his magazine. I know it was 20 years ago, but it was only 20 years ago. Where Vanity Fair was a big deal, New York Magazine was a big deal, Time Magazine was a big deal. And we're seeing all these changes in our lifetimes. And I was talking with my colleague, it was in the early 20s, and I said, you imagine what you're going to see in your lifetime when the digital age and the space age and AI with robotics intersects through all this stuff. Back to the point, I see DOGE as making federal government in Washington, D.C. more efficient and more effective. And if they do it the right way, in 5 years and 10 years, we'll look back at this moment and say, it's a good thing we cleaned up our house when we did.
I just see DOGE as what Elon Musk has very publicly talked about is so critical to anyone who lends the United States money. Right. Because I don't think people fully understand how close we are to the tipping point of a death spiral in terms of the interest that we pay on our debt, because almost 60% of our outstanding debt held by the public has to be rolled over or refinanced in 2 years. And so if interest rates, we already pay more for interest on the national debt than we pay for defense and Medicare. But that refinancing risk, interest rates skyrocket. If we send the message that we aren't getting our house in order, that death spiral begins for interest.
Absolutely. And that's why I'm so surprised by some senators who are, supposed holdouts when it comes to some of the spending cuts that you were talking about. I mean, I think at the end of the day, we've all got to get on the same page and realize, Dagan, how dire the situation is. I think what Trump is proposing here, rolling the debt ceiling increase in, is a good thing because we hate having that conversation as well. And what the tax cuts will look like, if there will be new tax cuts as he had promised, or it's just the extension, then you're going to have to help me on this, because my understanding of it is it goes back to the scoring, right? How are we looking at the extension of the 2017 tax cuts? If you look at it as something that exists already, then all of a sudden it's not adding as much to the deficit. But if you look at it as something new, which technically speaking it's not, then the score changes. But the slippery slope there, my understanding is if you go with a scoring approach that is to keep those as existing, then you're changing the way we do things in the future. And I don't know. I mean, to me, it sounds like fancy accounting. At the end of the day, we've all just got to get the bottom line to where it needs to be, which that soundbite, I think, highlighted. We need revenues coming in as well. I think the DOGE is a huge piece of it, but also the tariffs could generate some revenue. There's a lot here.
The scoring, Larry Kudlow talks about it, and it's actually an idea from Senator Mike Crapo, that you treat the tax cuts as they exist as if they are the current baseline.
Right.
And so they would not add to the debt. They would not need to be offset by spending cuts. But because the House Republicans have always been kind of kowtowing to the CBO when it comes to writing this legislation.
Brian, I mean, feel free to disagree with me, but for me, this comes down to timing. And I feel like, not to get too wonky, but we got more economic data this morning that sort of is starting to see the hard data confirm the weakness in the soft data. You guys, we've talked a lot about soft data being consumer sentiment, how people feel. Hard data being what we're actually doing. And typically hard data is much more reliable because watch what I do, not what I say. But with durable goods orders this morning, you're down. Non-defense capital goods are down by 0.3%, down by 1.2% year over year. One analyst writes that bottom line, every single regional manufacturing sector has now reflected a drop in capital spending plans due to the lack of business visibility. And today's durable goods orders is hard data confirming the soft. So I want to see tax cuts sooner rather than later because you don't want to see a rollover. And right now, I think everyone would suggest that you're looking at an economic slowdown, not a recession. But still, a slowdown could mean that if it goes on long enough, eventually you have to fix your fixed costs, which are employees, right? And the stuff that's really hard, it's not variable. It is on your book. So I just don't want to see this go on any longer than it has to.
I think you should feel better, though, because...
Tell me. Persuade me.
I mean, John Thune said he's going to bring this to the Senate floor on April 7th. Now, I'll believe it when I see it.
Yeah.
But thank you for that. That's a heck of a lot better than what we were talking about.
Like September.
2 weeks ago. A week ago. Okay, so it tells me these guys get this needs to happen fast. I think on a debt ceiling increase, it makes way more sense to do it with Republicans and negotiate with Chuck Schumer. So I think folding it into this thing probably makes sense. And I'm also happy that you got senators saying we want $2 trillion worth of cuts. Because you got a lot of people in the House saying the same thing as well. Now, again, to Dagan, you make the same noise. I'll believe it when I see it. Okay? But these are all good signs. It tells me the guys in Washington are hearing the American people on this. They're watching what's going on in the economy. I think President Trump is with them. And I think they all know they need a big boost of good news right now, especially with all the negative media coverage of DOGE and tariffs. This is how they get it. There's a lot of motivation there.
You think they can cut $2 trillion? $2 trillion.
That's what our deficit is. Our annual deficit is $2 trillion.
Well, Bill, I think you're asking the question because you know to do that, you got to go Medicaid is going to be part of that conversation.
And the Department of
And we're not even talking annually. When they score these things, it's over a 10-year period. So rephrase the question. This is my idea.
Yes,
rephrase it to every lawmaker. Why can't you live within your means? Because to Tommy Tuberville, I heard him the other day when he was on with Larry Kudlow when he brought up Medicaid. He said, well, 2 out of every 5 children in my state are on Medicaid. And, okay, well, but to suggest that Medicaid can't be touched, why is it that, and I keep bringing this up, why is it that 2/3 of all seniors in nursing homes in this country are on Medicaid, that their nursing home care is paid for by Medicaid? It's because their families can doggone well pay for it or take care of them themselves, but they go to lawyers and they shelter their assets so they get on Medicaid so the family gets to keep the assets and the government has to foot the bill for the elder care. And there are a lot of tricks that these big blue and red states use to siphon federal dollars into their Medicaid systems. And there's a lot of savings, like billions is going to California for illegal immigrants.
I would say 3 things. Brian, maybe you're right over time about $2 trillion. Jerry Baker was in a discussion the other day saying this has to be significant or the American people are not going to buy into it. I was like, what's the number? And it's hard to get at a number, but if it's $500 billion over a year, that's not nothing, folks. With regard to, look, the healthcare system and nursing homes in America is screwed up. It's wacky, right? You got to spend down your entire life savings to qualify for Medicaid. In the state of Ohio, you have to show that you're worth $2,000 before you kick into Medicaid. That is a huge challenge for people to do. So what they do is they end up spending $15,000 a month for a year and a half, 2 years, 3 years while they're getting nursing help until they're bled dry. Right. And the thing that's important to remember about that is the reason you think about that is you have to stay ahead of what the government's rules are. And you have to manage your own personal finances in a way that is most effective for you so that you can help out your family and make sure you're just not all kicking it away. Look, we went through this in my family several years ago. We're going through it now. It takes a lot of calculation and planning to get it right. It's not there for everyone. You have to hit a certain number before you
There are attorneys
qualify.
across the state of Florida, as an example, who shelter people's assets, that they put them in
100%.
trust and then dump the elderly person onto Medicaid. So the federal taxpayer and the state taxpayer cover this nursing home care, and then the family gets to keep the assets. So that happens in states because it's state-by-state rules. Ohio is different than New York, different from California, different from Florida. And I'm just saying 2/3, we used to take care of our own, is what we used to do.
Fair enough.